at the moment. There's the thing that I'm thinking about is all the decisions that were made in the meeting and coming out of the meeting that people are missing when they cut off a Zoom call, or that kind of ability to focus on someone's body language in the corner. That is going to hurt productivity.
From my home office to you, this is the Place OS podcast. This is my interview with Ian Morgan. His career story is really interesting, having worked in different countries and as a consultant and then as a tech strategist. We were part of a Tech Panel Knowledge series in 2019, and Ian's answers to the questions actually evolved from one city to the next, as assumptions about how people felt about their data privacy were just thrown out in the discussions with the group attending the panel. My favourite part of this discussion is to talk about those assumptions, but also I really love talking about the diversity in the workplace that you just can't see. And I'll go into this even more with an upcoming podcast with Robin DeCirca from Deloitte. I really like these kind of topics. So talking to interesting people about interesting topics makes this podcast really fun to do. Here's Ian. My guest today on the Place OS podcast is Ian Morgan. He's previously been with AMP Capital and Deloitte in the US and the UK. Ian and I worked on the AMP Capital project where we developed a product that sits on Place OS that allows tenants to book and pay for services that AMP Capital offers, like flexible spaces within their buildings. His LinkedIn bio no longer reads optimistic pragmatist, thinking and doing, trust and control.
It's because you gave me too much hassle for it.
It's true, yes. I gave you a lot of shit about your LinkedIn bio, but there's really good parts to that. So I'm disappointed that you took out the optimistic pragmatist.
I thought it described my personality well, but everyone, I've got to listen to the people, and a lot of people said it made me sound like a bit of a dick. So it went. I still describe myself to my friends as an optimistic pragmatist, though. Maybe a pragmatic realist on my darker days.
Yeah, so you just have to, it's like turning down the wankerness on LinkedIn, but for people who know you, they know that you're not like that, so it's perfectly okay to use that language.
Yeah, it's I'm not I shunned social media in 2009. I kind of came off everything, so I'm not a great social mediaist. If that term exists, I don't know how to like take a good selfie or anything,
No, me neither. No, hopeless. I do love podcasts though, and that's this medium is really good. Yeah, like I've got the head for radio, I think.
Not the face.
All right, so we recorded a podcast a couple of months ago, and we got way off track. But this time, we're going to nail this podcast, because the reason I wanted to talk to you was you have so many ideas and you always have your finger on the pulse of trends, and like you're not afraid to put your ideas out there and just make them known. And sometimes it ends up in a bit of a debate back and forth between us, but sometimes we end up agreeing as well. And at the AMP Capital panel last year, we talked about 10-year trends for buildings that landlords and tenants had to embrace. And with COVID-19, we can make even more bold predictions, I think. And I think that you're the person to sort of bounce those ideas back and forth. So, desks versus collaboration spaces post-COVID-19. What do you think we're going to see?
I think we're going to see people use desks at home, but increasing use of collaboration spaces. And whether that's provided by one office or a flex space, I think that will be the trend to go. The thing that I keep coming back to is around what work looks like now and what work will continue to look like in the future. And ultimately, if it's a desk-based activity, we all have to do desk-based activities. We can't get away from it. And sometimes before COVID-19, there is definitely a productivity benefit to being at home. You're not distracted by other people. You can kind of get your head down and get on with it. But largely, a lot of the work that humans are going to be doing now and in the future is kind of complex problem solving. The notion of experts or people that have all the answers is kind of, that's gone, right? That sort of went 5 years ago, and the ubiquitous access of the internet made that knowledge base almost totally redundant. But to solve those complex problems, we need to collaborate. And humans still a species that collaborate and communicate more importantly in different ways. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening at the moment. There's the thing that I'm thinking about is all the decisions that were made in the meeting and coming out of the meeting that people are missing when they cut off a Zoom call, or that kind of ability to focus on someone's body language in the corner. That is going to hurt productivity. It's that
Oh,
ability to.
100%.
Sorry.
Oh, 100. Like, I just came off a call with 13 people on it. I couldn't see any of them. We did it over Skype, so everyone had their videos turned off.
Yeah.
And it was a presentation to people about a smart building offering that incorporated like 12 different features, like 12 different text streams. So to do that, I'm literally in my home office and I'm staring at my screen, not being able to see anybody, but just walking them through a presentation and trying to like get some engagement. It's really difficult.
Yeah. And it's kind of. And we now one of the other sides of this as well is we talk about in the innovation space, we talk around being. I've kind of moved away from the notion of being customer centered because look, I think that was just management consultants trying to spin a new thing. Businesses have always been set up to serve customers, right? That's what they do. But we're now in the age of kind of making things more accessible to more people in a quick fashion. For that, collaboration with customers is absolutely essential, and that can't happen during COVID. I mean, you can probably do it virtually, but it's extremely difficult. But your collaboration with your customers to kind of look, feel, touch, learn with them, that's not an option via COVID-19. And I'm not saying we don't do that 100% of the time, right? So that's why the ability to have access to a collaboration space is extremely important. But whether we need access to those collaboration spaces 100% of the time, I don't think that's the case. So if I was the CEO of a 100-person business, I'd be saying, look, pragmatically, how many desks do I need, and how much access to collaboration space do I need? And I'd be looking at tweaking that balance.
Yeah, I'd be doing the same. I also, we just introduced a new feature on our workplace app that allows you to go to a space and then put yourself into stealth mode. Because what we've recognized is that, one, people don't want to be bothered sometimes.
Yeah.
And even though that they're in the building, that, we can still pick them up that they're in the building if location services is turned on. But to notify the rest of their company in an interface that they're all looking at, that they're in stealth mode, they're doing deep work for the next 3 hours, and then coming out of that. So as people get back to going into workplaces, even how desks function and the kind of features that you can put around desks to sort of let people be more productive, let them say, hey, I need to be in stealth mode right now, I don't want to be bothered. And on the back end, that actually gives us some really good analytics about how the space is being used and what people do in those particular spaces. So I think we'll start to see the analytics about desks versus collaboration spaces and how people are using them as well. What about a wellness focus post-COVID-19? We've already seen that trend for wellness classes, meditation. The bushfires in New South Wales and Victoria in particular were pretty hectic over our summer. So air quality became quite topical. And even, one that's been around for a while is that sit to stand desk and ergonomics about the workstation. Do you think, people have been working from their laps, from their couches, from their beds? We'll see a resurgence in ergonomic related wellness as well?
Yeah, I do. I think one of the, coming back to sort of the root cause, I think people, this COVID time or this isolation time, people are going to be way more aware of how they work and the difference between how they work as well. So you mentioned that deep work, you mentioned this collaboration focus. I think what will change is people won't just talk about work anymore. They'll talk about the nature of the task within the work. And I think that individuals will be far more aware of their ergonomic requirements as well. So I think you will start to see we've seen this trend in technology as well. So people from a technology perspective haven't wanted to work in an environment whereby their work tech is worse than their home tech. I think we're going to see that as well, and from a people perspective, that people aren't going to want to work in an office that isn't as ergonomically or supports their broader well-being in the same way as their home office. Because if I could, this period of time has proven that people can be trusted to work from home. So if I've got a better setup at home, then why wouldn't I work from home?
Yeah, well, I do have a better setup at home. I've got a really good monitor, a really good electronic desk that helps me do the sit to stand at my height.
Which is about
But
12'9", right?
yeah, 12'9", about that. And then I'm sharing it with my husband, who's like 15 feet. So,
Wow.
I have to bring it down a bit. But so I've got a really good setup at home, nice office and Outlook and all of that sort of stuff. But I can just see some of these features coming back into the workplace where, like, customers are asking us for NFC tap on at some of the desks and integrating that into Place OS. But we could also integrate that and see, are there furniture suppliers that would let us do the NFC tap that has some kind of preference that electronically puts that desk at the height that you prefer it. So,
yeah, I kind of that's kind of stuff. I sometimes think if that's tech for the sake of tech. If there's a control on the side, whether it's manual, a little wind-up thing, or it's a button that allows you to adjust the height of the desk, I generally think that would be strong enough. But there's a lot of desks that don't even have that.
Yeah, but it's the same thing that used to happen with the room, right? So people used to spend 15, or still do sometimes, really, spend 15 minutes setting up the AV at the start of the meeting just to present a screen and start a video conference call. In our solutions now, that doesn't happen. They walk in and that's automatically triggered. So some of those things that you have to do anyway, like sit down at a desk and put tap your phone on the NFC reader, that gives you the occupancy, or it incentivizes you some way. Like you might earn points when you're checking it at a workstation or something like that. But from that one action, you can glean several different triggered things, and it can all be around. It's just an idea. It's all preference driven. It's all this stuff that's sort of technically viable, and we just want to see what the ideas that come out of this isolation period are.
Well, I mean, the trend that you're circling there is about workplace personalization, right? Is that your workplace understands who you are and what your preferences are.
Yeah.
It's the extent to which there will be consumption for however, because there's a point where the tech can make the process overwhelming and complex, and there's actually quite a fine line between doing that. If there's any kind of form that software has become so good now that people have to expend any form of mental effort to understand how something works, then there's a real lack of adoption on that kind of stuff as well. So I think it's about understanding whether the line of personalization becomes onerous versus becomes something that supports, a feature that allows you to activate a room and it knows who you are and what your meeting's about, and then it automatically dials everyone else in. That to me seems like a really good use of technology. Having an individual scan their phone on a desk for a particular preset ergonomic setup, which may change depending on what people want at a certain point in time. I kind of feel so. If we take that example, right? So I want my desk set at 15, and I scan it, but then on this one particular day, I've hurt my hamstring running. On the rare occasion I do go running.
I was gonna say.
and I want it set at 10 because I want to sit down for longer. Do I then have to go in and program it through my user interface on my phone to then adjust the desk? I kind of feel that feels a little bit overhead driven for me.
Yeah, it's the same as when I use my Sonos app at home. When
What stuff?
Sorry?
When you use your what stuff?
The Sonos app?
Oh,
It's
Sonos
like
app. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I, like my phone might be in my bedroom and I'm trying to play music in the kitchen, I have to leave the kitchen to go and get my phone to control the Sonos. Like there is a button on it, but it's not giving me the playlist. So it's kind of, it is when you live in that app driven world and everything comes through your phone, you're sort of missing the point of like the control is just there, the device is just there.
Yeah, and that comes
There's some kind of balance.
Yeah, and that comes down to the cognitive and physical effort element. So there's obviously physical effort required in that because you have to go and get your phone. It's the same as a cognitive. And one of the things I've been surprised, one of the interesting situations is the multiple breed demographics that we have in buildings at the moment. I've been pretty surprised at the speed at which certain demographics are not filtered by age because you get early adopters in every age group, but it's the difference between the early adopters and the laggards, and the speed with which an early adopter will take a new tech and incorporate that new tech into their daily routine, and then expect the next feature. When you still have those people still kind of resisting on the other side, and that might be one of the positive outcomes of the COVID thing. It's driven broader technical adoption because people have had to use technology in ways that they haven't done that previously. So I'm hoping that might be one of the speed with which people adopt good tech. I'm hoping that will be one of the good sides
Yeah.
of this.
Well, and it's not even just individual users. Like some of the stuff we're talking about wellness here is air quality, and that a user doesn't have to touch that. That's more about the building owners and the building operators adopting that kind of tech. So I guess the more and more familiar they're becoming with tech, the more, I guess, what's the right word? Like the more invested they're becoming, the more open to what it can do for their jobs as well. I think there might be some pressure on trying to understand things like air quality and what the air quality inside a building now should be.
Yeah,
And that's all automated in the background. That doesn't have to run through an application for an employee at all.
yeah. I mean, it's a hot off the press thing, but I've just seen that Scott Morrison's announced a safe work, and I guess it'll be like a certificate or something. And I'm wondering if that will be one of the criteria for a safe work environment post COVID. So yeah, it's all that kind of ability to understand, provide a safe and comfortable environment, and be able to demonstrate you can do that. That's going to become far more significant in the next 6 to 9 months, I think.
And so one of our other points here on my list is contactless everything. So you think that will potentially be a part of that safe work? Because we're talking about things that we can do without even touching devices anymore. Like AV used to be controlled by a shared control panel, or we can do a lot of that via automation now, or via your own device. You don't have to touch a common panel anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm still, when I bought my house, I went to, I was looking at other houses, as you do when you're buying a house. And the tech, like the panel tech dates so quickly. Like it's a real kind of eyesore in residential properties. But I don't understand why we still put panels in buildings. I'm just not sure there's ever. I mean, it's just I'm not sure there's a need for it. One of the things that I'm expecting to hit a maturity point in the next 2 years is voice control. So
Yeah.
we should be looking at how we can use sort of natural language, maybe something like an Amazon Alexa or a Siri or a Google Home element. I think there's looking at the adoption rates in residential, and this comes back to this whole view again of people want a similar experience in work to what they want at home. I think there's going to I control all my lights at home via Alexa, for example, and if I'm not at home, I can control it via my own phone. That trend in buildings, that'll come, and that'll come fairly quickly, I think.
Agree. Definitely agree.
There's no technological barrier to it. It's just landlords would need to invest significant capital in providing it, and they haven't had to do it because there hasn't been the consumer demand, the customer drivers for that kind of thing. People now living at home, and they've sort of invested in making their own home offices better. That will be the kind of the pressure point, I think, to pressure landlords into investing in this sort of thing, because landlords have been reluctant to provide tech that improves experience for a little while now.
Yeah, we're scoping a couple of projects at the moment. I mean, they're not going to be completed builds for at least 12, 18 months. But they're definitely asking for things like virtual assistant and, like support for Siri and Google on our apps,
Yeah,
Google Assistant on our apps. And so it's really interesting. What I've often experienced is that clients will come to us with this amazing wish list of features, but towards actually making decisions and then getting into the build, a lot of it gets watered down to practical completion things.
yeah.
So yeah, like we're definitely scoping those sorts of features already, and I think a couple of them will sneak through. They'll have good enough planning, they'll have good enough thought leaders within their organizations to actually make that happen, and allow us techies to kind of let loose with that and build it for them.
Yeah,
So,
it's if you just come back to kind of the rules of market as well in this, there's obviously supply and demand that affects price point. So if we come back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of reduced demand for physical space, because people have now worked out that employees can work from home. So if you reduce demand, then supply increases, and that drives the price point lower. So what we're going to see, what I hope we see, is a pressure on landlords to provide differentiated experience as a driver to get people into utilize their buildings. Because the CBD in Sydney, for example, has got 98% sort of utilization rate. There's no drive, there's no pressure on landlords to provide additional service because they can rent it out at a high premium anyway. So therefore, the price point on the asset is being pushed up because of supply and demand levers. COVID could adjust the supply demand relationship, and therefore it will force innovation from landlords to provide better experience and better buildings.
that would be cool. So you think we're going to see a lot more working from home, and do you think that we'll have better features for that, like digital whiteboards overlaid on video conferences, for example?
That's a tough one. The thing with so I actually I connected my iPad to my laptop and had a pretty sophisticated, because I've got the iPad
iPad
stylus
Pro?
as well. So I had a pretty
Yeah.
sophisticated, and I use Adobe Illustrator as well, right? So I had, arguably the most sophisticated whiteboard that you can manage from home. But what I actually found is the thing with the whiteboard, it's not about access to the whiteboard itself. It's about the ability to kind of gather people round and have multiple people drawing at the same time using different color pens. It's kind of that scrappy design process. So it's not necessarily access to the whiteboard. I think we can do that. But again, it comes down to this desire to collaborate with other human beings. The whiteboard facilitates collaboration. It's not necessarily a mechanism to communicate visually. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
So
We're getting asked for things like that, though, even in one of the health solutions where clinicians who are running virtual consultations, they want the ability to annotate within the conference call. So you can do that within things like WebEx. So to drive some of the native, so some video conferencing tech has that, so we can use some of those native features if PlaceOS is integrated and then running sort of the front end, the
yeah,
virtual waiting rooms into the consultation. But for other systems like PEXIT, they don't have a native whiteboard. So could we put something on top of that helps clinicians annotate x-rays and be able to do that quick design communication? It's more a one-to-one thing. It's not really a group whiteboarding session in that respect, but it is more kind of what comes natural to the clinician is a lot of writing and drawing pictures,
yeah.
and and them trying to explain that to a patient down the other end of a video conference. That's the sort of functionality that they're asking us for.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely there is definitely a place for that, and that we do need the tools, right? Because having the tools is better than not having the tools, but it's not going to replace we're not going. This comes down to I've been trying to replace my notebook for
Mm-hmm.
for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never. So I bought like an iPad, and I bought there's an Amazon like writing thing as well. But I've never found it. The main reason being, I was always concerned that I'd lose my notebook, and it always had like loads of loads of information I wouldn't necessarily want shared in it. So I've tried all these different technological solutions, but I never found anything that was as good as that notebook and pen. So we'll have solutions for things like digital whiteboarding, annotating, and it's so much better than just being able to kind of verbally communicate over a phone. That it's so much better than that. So therefore, there is a need and a requirement for that, and we will innovate to get to a solution that works well there. However, it doesn't. It's still not as good as putting people down, as gathering people or gathering someone around a whiteboard and being able to look at them whilst you draw a picture or whilst you annotate a piece of an X-ray to use your example. So we'll kind of put intermediary fixes in. One of the things that I think solves that problem is the virtual reality, augmented reality element. And one of the things that I'm expecting is there's probably some genius developer that's been made redundant as a result of the slowdown, and has been hacking away in their garage of some sort of virtual office. That's what I'm really looking forward to see, and that's kind of on my top of my wish list for what comes out of this period is a genuine virtual office.
Yeah, that's cool. I'd like to see that too. I would also like to see us when we're doing more meetings, like just rethinking when we do go back to work, what that looks like as far as like sitting on video conferencing all day is kind of soul destroying. Like if you have back to back video
Massively.
conferences, and I've had days where I might have 6 hours of my 8 hours worth of video conferencing. Like it is, it's not ideal by any stretch, and it just means that I'm sitting so much, and that I'm not catching public transport at the moment. I'm just missing all of that movement, and I know that we could already do it pre-COVID, but we just didn't think to, and sort of being more conscious about making moving meetings, making them as part of the walk around the block.
Mm.
Just instead of that traditional way that we have to do anything that's going to get us away from tech, and it might be helpful as well.
Well, yeah, it's I kind of one of the things that I'm hearing from friends and colleagues is that physical meetings, which were a waste of time anyway, have been replaced by virtual meetings, which is still a waste of time. This that kind of people, particularly people in senior positions, they've seen their diary, as you said there, just fill up completely with these Zoom meetings, and they're scheduled
Mhm.
for an hour, so it'll last an hour. But there's a broader cultural perspective here around don't have a meeting if you don't need one. And I kind of
Yeah.
what hasn't happened, I don't think, in my opinion, is that people haven't gone. Actually, I don't need this meeting. I'm not going to have it. I think people have gone. I'm a little bit unsure. I know what I'll do because it's easy, because it's convenient. I'll schedule a Zoom.
Yeah.
I think
I'll
there are more
schedule the
meetings now than
Zoom.
there used to be, which is
Yeah,
not
I'll put
good.
it on Zoom, and then I'll turn my camera off, and I'll just do other work while that's playing in the background.
Yeah,
I reckon that's something that people are doing so much right now.
yeah,
Um,
dear listener, please avoid.
yeah.
Is that what you do? Is that what you do right now? The thing that one of that I have very firm views on productivity, and two of the biggest scourges on enterprise productivity are emails and meetings. Right? If we took out
Oh,
emails and meetings on Mondays and Tuesdays, I guarantee people will be far more productive. But what's happening is that during this time, I think my personal view on this is productivity's gone through the floor because the number of meetings and the number of emails has gone up exponentially. And largely, I think that's a symptom of human anxiety. I think people are trying to prove that they're busy by scheduling meetings and sending emails and that kind of stuff, but it's having the adverse effect. I think people are just kind of like, this is sort of busy work, and really what you should be doing is getting your head down and getting on with some stuff that can be done effectively during this period.
you can't see me, but I'm nodding along. I'm surprised at how much we're agreeing today, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
We should talk about politics, so that normally sets us off.
do you think we'll be craving human connection, or do you think that we'll be happy to get that elsewhere, like family and friends outside of work? Like, do you
No,
think we'll be looking for more?
I think we're absolutely desperate to get back to that human connection piece. It's it's kind of why we go to work. Actually, I think.
Well, one of the reasons I go to work is because our banter is so good. And even on our chat platform, it's just so good because you've got a collection of people who have very similar, like, I don't know, just, I guess the culture sort of determines the people that we hire. And we just have really good banter. So it's a similar sort of intelligence level, I guess. So everybody's kind of into the same things and they have a similar sense of humor about things.
Yeah,
So it's not really something that I get from my family or my friends that I met in different, through school or through netball or something like that. It's more that, these are my tech friends and they've got good banter.
yeah, and it's also I think I think if you work in technology, you're generally pretty interested in it. I think like
Mm.
I like having conversations around how the best use to deploy technology, or whether or not what we're doing is actually customer centric, or if we're just kind of faffing around the edges, or the best way to ingest data from an IoT device. I like having those conversations, and those conversations don't happen organically when we're all working from home. So you kind of like, what should I? You get to a point, should I schedule a Zoom just to kind of kick some ideas around? And then it becomes a very artificial process because we're trying to when we're kind of all working from home, we're having to be more structured. So we're having to schedule meetings, that kind of stuff. Creativity and innovation doesn't happen necessarily on a schedule. You can have a brilliant idea just from a conversation that you have with someone in the lift, and we're
Mm-hmm.
missing all those kinds of opportunities. So I think, yeah, definitely craving human connection again.
And
It feeds the creativity process.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree again. This is weird. What about the energy of extroverts and introverts? So what I'm learning, I'm definitely an extrovert. I get energy from being around people, and that's kind of how an extrovert is. Does that's the definition.
Yeah,
Um, and so when I'm not around people, I just feel a bit flat. So I'll have days where I'm a bit flat. Whereas my husband's a bit more introverted, and he's perfectly fine. Like he's getting enough connection from the family and the like the chat that he's having with his workmates over the phone or over conference calls. And I think like talking to my workmates as well, there's a bit of a difference. There's even memes going around it about it, us extrovert, checking on your extrovert friends. But you think we're learning a bit more about different personality types, behavior types, and maybe we'll build spaces that will cater to people a bit better, looking at that psychology.
yeah. So like I'm pretty introverted. Not many people work that out because I've done roles where I need to be quite extroverted. But I'm pretty introverted, and I feel like I am. If I hadn't had a baby, not that I had the baby, my wife had the baby. I was there though. It was pretty traumatic. If I would feel so, I'd feel so much less tired. Um, I find kind of working existence now way less tiring than I do in terms of going to work. That doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean it's more satisfying though.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting to me. So you feel like going to work, being in all of those meetings, doing a particularly extroverted role that drains your energy a bit.
Yeah,
It's
massively.
probably not the best way to utilize your function.
Yeah, it massively drains me. It's one of the biggest contentious points at home because all my energy was going out to work and that kind of stuff. And by sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock, I was
Mm-hmm.
sort of I didn't really have any energy left for any conversation. And then the
Yep.
weekends would be used for recharging before you go again. So my wife used to say to me pretty frequently that the best of me went to meant to my colleagues, and the worst of me was left to my family. So
I
that's
think that's a very common thing that happens with people, and
yeah, and I
it's
think particularly
so common.
and I think that's particularly true of introverts that are performing a role that demands them to be a little bit more, demands them to be more extroverted.
Yeah, my husband's exactly the same. He's in sales and marketing and software. He spends so much time of his day talking, managing people, and his work is very energizing for him. Really likes it, but then yeah, like you just need time to recharge and not talk to anybody when you finish your work day. So I think that would be a common thing for people. I would love to see us, you know, think about how we could better cater for different personality types and so that we could get the most out of them, not just expect that one size fits all.
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of my most I have a massive issue with diversity in workplace diversity initiative because they're large. I think they're immature. They're so focused on kind of the diversity that we can see, whether that be gender or racial, and we t- and we and I kind of I'm open to an organization that really takes neurodiversity seriously, that the fact
mhm,
that people think in different ways, or the fact that people are affected positively or adversely by like a neural condition like ASD or dyslexia and that kind of stuff. I haven't seen anyone anywhere that's really kind of committed and outspoken about that level of neural diversity. And I think that will be, I hope, kind of the 2020s will be the point that we get serious about that.
yeah, I love this topic. You and I have spoken before about that diversity that you can't see. And
Yeah,
even if you talk about, white middle aged men get cop it, right? At the moment, they're copying it left, right, and center for, I don't know, everything. But even within that group, there is a huge amount of diversity. And you can talk to people from very different backgrounds who don't feel privileged, but they're getting labeled as privileged because they're a 40-year-old white man.
yeah,
um,
in a senior role in a large organization, right?
yeah.
It's also the view of economic diversity. We publish, like, it's pretty common to publish how many men or how many women are at certain, like, partners in consulting firms, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Are we
Yeah.
publishing how many of those men and how many of those women went to private school, for example, or were born into low socioeconomic families? Because we aren't
Hmm.
publishing any of that data
Yeah.
anywhere that I can find.
No. And even just the human factors around like what's happened in their lives that makes them a better human at work. Like there's so much that I think. Oh, there was a really good article on the female leaders at the moment and how they're dealing with COVID
Hmm.
and some of those leadership qualities that aren't necessarily traditional leadership qualities, but they're talking about they're embracing technology, they're embracing love and kind of coming at it from a point of view of education. So holding press conferences for children only to really explain the effects of this coronavirus and COVID-19 and what's going on.
Yeah.
Coming at it from real empathy, like Jacinda Ardern's just the poster child for leadership in that way. And
Yeah.
there's even within, you can't say just because you're a woman you've got those things, but there is sort of these things emerging that we don't really have any way to measure, but there's something that happens in people's lives that makes them more empathetic, makes them be able to lead with all of those characteristics.
Yeah, the Jacinda Ardern thing I think is really interesting. So I saw a LinkedIn post. I've got some dubious people on my LinkedIn. I need to have a clear out. But there was this thing about, you know Jacinda Ardern's obviously done some extraordinary things as a leader, as you say there. But it was pointed out that the fact that she did all these things and she was female. I'm not sure, and I mean, just in your perspective, I'm not sure the fact that she's female is relevant to the fact that she's an excellent leader. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, that kind of feels sort of discriminatory it didn't feel right. I'm not quite sure why it didn't feel right, but it was pointed out that she's a woman and she's done these things. Well, actually, she's a person and she's done these things. They're extraordinary, whether you're male or female. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's the next level of this curve that people are on. Yeah. um What about like hiring staff in different locations and like changes in working hours? So I'll give you an example. We at Place OS, I shifted my work hours from 2 p.m. till 10 p.m. so that I could homeschool my kids during the day, let my husband work pretty, I mean, he still gets disruptions, but so it's kind of a tag team. So he'll work from 7 till 2, and then I'll work from 2 till 10.
Mm.
And because I've done that, I've actually been able to cover a few extra things in other time zones that I should be getting more involved in. Like as a global sales sort of lead, you want to be involved in new projects in Poland. Yeah, that involve breweries. Like it's quite cool. So we've been at it's worked out for us work wise, but it's also given me extra time with my kids, which is very nice. And another thing that we did in the midst
You
of
were
all of
saying it was
this,
very nice last week. This week.
yeah, you got me on a flat day last week. The other thing that we did is we hired a developer just because he's really good. He's based in the middle of Tasmania somewhere, like not even Hobart or Launceston or Devonport, not a major city, just like out in Tasmanian bush. But he's an excellent developer, and he just fits our culture really nicely. We can give him a whole bunch of tools. He works from home, and I mean, we're probably one of those businesses that thinks like that anyway, but I'm hoping that we get to see a little bit more of that from the companies that we work with as well. What do you think?
It's an interesting one because when I started my career consulting, I worked with a lot of organizations that were outsourcing. That was the big thing that everyone was doing there, and they were outsourcing a lot of their operations to places like India and Poland from the UK. And then, sort of 10 years later, I was working with similar organizations, bringing all their operations back onshore because in that time, that 10-year period, tech had gone from something that was about kind of maintaining predictability and cost to being a differentiated capability. And the essence when you have large scale outsourcing, I think in your example for one person is probably pretty straightforward. But when you have large scale outsourcing, where you outsource entire processes or entire development teams, it's very hard to get the agility and speed that's mandated in organizations now. So it will be interesting to see. Again, I think it comes down to tasks. If you have someone that is head down doing deep work in development, maybe that works. And if they have the right culture, if the right cultural fit, and you have the tools available to collaborate, maybe it works in that way. But my view of outsourcing wholesale functions is that it doesn't provide organizations with the agility they require.
What about incentives for building and retail? So one of the projects that we did in PwC in Singapore involved a workplace wallet whereby you gain points by doing things within the workplace. So, you might have done a great job on a project and someone gives you a few points, or you may have reported a monitor being down, and that was helpful because, that allowed a ticket to be raised and for that issue to get solved. So it's this workplace wallet where you have all these points and then you can redeem them for things in the retail precinct as part of the whole commercial precinct. So go and grab a coffee, you can get a free lunch, whatever it is. Do you think we're going to see landlords be innovative enough to put some of those workplace precinct incentives in place so that people are incentivized to come back to buildings to transact in those precincts?
I kind of hope not.
Okay.
I don't like. Look. This is. I think people should be motivated in their workplace to do their jobs, motivated by the people they work with. If we need to get to a point where we're offering, people points for doing things like reporting monitors out, I'm just not sure if that's gone too far.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I'm pretty. I don't have the relationship with. I think this is a product of consulting as well. I tend to not have the relationship with buildings and places that a lot of people that have worked in non-consulting roles have to have. For me, like an office has always just been a place where people are. And that's what my motivational factor is. If there are incentives to use a space in that way to drive returning custom, yeah, look, I guess that makes sense. It's just not something that would necessarily appeal to me.
Yeah, okay. Um, I
Okay, there's
can't.
some
This is
disagreement for
my
you.
last question, but this is probably going to send you on one of your rants. So during the panel that we did last
This is
year
going to
from
send me around.
Brisbane to Sydney to Melbourne, you actually changed your point of view on data security versus user experience. And I think during this COVID period, we've experienced again like another wave of what people are prepared to give up in order for their experience. And I'm talking about apps like House Party and Zoom.
Yeah,
Where are you at now? Like,
I'm still scared by it.
mm,
And the shift in my view it was more a case of the responsibility that organisations will have to take for securing um, personal data and biometric data. My initial just to qualify what happened, my initial position was that landlords and should not deal with biometrics. As someone that worked for a landlord, I was like, I don't want to touch any of that data. It's far too hot to handle. It's
yep.
taking people's biometric data for things like door entry and that kind of stuff and holding it in some form of database. It's just the risk of it made my eyes water. But as we went through those panels, I could see that that was kind of an expectation. And again, not just amongst younger people who have yet to learn, but amongst all generations, all ages. So I was like, well, clearly, if that's a customer expectation, then the expectation is going to be on the industry and the people that work in technology within that industry to be able to utilize and secure that data, which was a pretty terrifying um, revelation. But yeah, it, I kind of I'm interested in this. I'm interested to see how the debate around the app in Australia will play out. So there's obviously the government are, for those people not from Australia, the Australian government are going to launch a tracing app to manage any future COVID spread. There's a lot of controversy about that in Australia because of the extent of people being tracked. People don't like the idea of being tracked. And
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the things I'm interested to buy, and I have no data on this support, but are the people that are concerned about being tracked the same people that upload pictures on Instagram and have Facebook accounts and have their entire employment history on their LinkedIn profiles, and the people that are using things like House Party and Zoom, because if they're using those applications, they're giving that data away for free anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what it's interesting I guess maybe one of the things that they're looking at is people trust corporations like Facebook more than they trust the actual government, which is a pretty insane position.
Yeah, very scary. Very scary. The um the app is interesting from a point of view of just using Bluetooth technology um, to, you know, it's more about marking who you come into contact with rather than tracing you, as I understand it, from location to location, right?
Yeah,
It's a lot of those features we can already do that in the workplace using Cisco Meraki. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of cool. It's a cool functionality. Like if it's not just tracking you on all of where you're going. I mean, most places, especially if you're urban living, a CCTV anyway, so you're being tracked in one way or another.
that's
But
good.
being tracked by, sorry,
Yeah, but I agree with it.
yeah,
But there's also this kind of this general hostility to the government tracking you. But as you say, they're doing it anyway, and you're giving your data away up to and including your biometric data to try and get some form of experience kick. It's I kind of I see that as being pretty alarming because once you give your data away, you can't get it back.
hmm,
But as we found out during those panels, my view on this is pretty much in the minority, and that was a significant revelation for me actually.
yeah, it was really interesting to see how much people were happy to give away in order for them to have less friction, I
Yeah.
guess. But people use platforms like Facebook or Instagram largely, and TikTok. TikTok's another one, largely for entertainment value. Really, like it's what draws them there is that talking to people, seeing photos, seeing videos, having a laugh. But when you're talking about using that same technology, maybe even less invasive because it's less data that you're giving away as far as tracing for the effects of like contact tracing, all of a sudden, well, that's not fun. That's no fun. Why would I give away my data for no fun? That's a serious thing that you're doing there.
Yeah, so maybe it's about the reward. If
Yeah,
there was some reward, maybe if you got some points that you go into like a bakery, and then you could
yeah,
like have a sausage roll for participating, then maybe people would be more inclined to do it. Maybe there is something in that. Maybe that's maybe I'm being too glib with my dismissal of points make prizes situation.
yeah. Like, did Facebook sit around and start going, how do we get everybody on the planet's data? We want to know their first name, their last name, their location, where they went to school, their marital status, where they check in at restaurants. Like, did they sit there and go, hey, we want all of this data because we know that we can advertise to people and probably sell it on the black market somehow? But we better build an application that's like people going to want to use, and it's going to be like gamified to say, I'm checking into Nobu. Like that's, I just wonder, are they sitting, the Facebook geniuses kind of sitting there asking those questions and then putting together the app? Or was it an accident that all of a sudden they had access to all of this data that they now have to worry about controlling?
It was probably evolutionary. I mean, at the point there was probably a tipping point. So if they probably built the app to go, this is great, and people will be able to introduce themselves to other people on campus. And then they got to a point where they said, how the hell can we make money from this thing? And then those conversations probably happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll be an optimist. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt in that
Oh no!
situation.
Don't trust any. Don't trust any of those. I probably can't believe I'm saying this, but I probably trust the government before I trust the tech firms.
This has been a surprising talk with you, Ian. Um, Thank you. I'm going to leave it there. I'm surprised how much we agreed on those things. I'm pretty excited to see what comes post this. I think we're already seeing some nice things um, come out of this period of lockdown. I think tomorrow in Australia is Anzac Day, and people are planning vigils at the end of their driveways and putting out candles and still finding ways to celebrate and say thank you for really important things, even though we can't all gather together. And I know that the planet is healing as well, so there's going to be plenty of good things to come out of this. Some of those will be related to workplace and human connection and driving collaboration. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. And yeah, thank you so much for the talk.
Thank you. Speak to you
All right,
soon.
talk soon. Bye.
Bye bye.